Welcome to the Time for a Reset podcast, the podcast where I, Paul Frampton, interview senior marketers on the big issues of the day and the thing that they want to see reset with an ever-changing landscape. Welcome back to another episode of Time for a Reset. This morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Steph Douglas. Steph is the founder of a business called Don't Buy Her Flowers, which is a thoughtful gifting company, an e-commerce business. Steph previously used to run the integrated marketing team at EDF Energy and left to set up this business. So she's got a very in-depth and experienced career in marketing, and now runs a business where marketing and the brand obviously plays a key part to what she thinks about and how that business grows. So welcome, Steph. Lovely to have you.
Hello.
Would you mind just giving people a quick potted history of how Don't Buy Her Flowers was founded and your vision from the outset?
Yeah. So it came about when I had my first baby, and that was he's 10, so 10 years ago. I received loads of bouquets, probably about 8, and it wasn't something I was expecting. I had no idea that you kind of got gifts when you had a baby, and these bouquets kept arriving, and it just struck me as a really weird gift to send someone who is probably exhausted, overwhelmed. They've just physically done quite a lot, but also mentally they're doing quite a lot. And it's something you've got to look after. And also, I think just from a practical level, I had 2 vases and more flowers.
Right.
Yeah.
Who has more than 2 vases?
Exactly. Especially kind of that stage of my life. And it just seemed like a really strange gift. And that was basically the core of the idea. And I think from that point, if a friend had a baby, I was on maternity leave, obviously, for like a year, and I had another baby fairly soon after. So I was at home quite a bit. And I would send them some chocolate in a magazine, or just something that was about them, not something for the baby, not flowers, and always just some encouragement, just to say it's going to be okay, it's going to get easier. Because I believe, I know I've had 3, but I know not everyone feels the same, but most people find that first bit really tough. It's tough on your relationship, it's tough on your body, it's tough on your mind, all of it.
Yeah, and there's not much you time, is there, or me time?
No, and it's a lot, and it's a huge change, and it gets easier in my view. But I think just at that moment, it was like, well, surely there's something better that someone could send. And the response I had from friends, if I sent them this, a bit of chocolate or whatever, they'd be like, "Oh my God, this was so lovely. It was something for me." And that's kind of where it came from. So fast forward kind of 4 years, and I started a blog first, because starting a business felt massive. So I'd gone back to work, and I'd never fancied myself as an entrepreneur, and it just felt such a big step to start a business because it's a lot to think about. So I started a blog, and that went really well. And it was just writing about motherhood and writing honestly. And it was kind of, the idea was, if people connect with that and they feel the same as I do, because at the time, not many people were talking very honestly about being a parent. Right. That's changed quite a lot, but they weren't then. And then the response was, posts were going viral, and so I was like, oh, there's something in this. And if that works for connecting people on an emotional level, whether you're writing about your husband or wanting to hurt him with a spade when you're in the throes of those hormonal first months, all that sort of stuff, then people would also appreciate a lovely gift that was about TLC. So that was the start of it. We launched as Gifts for New Mums in November 2014. But really quick, customers started saying, I want to send something for my friend who's had a really bad week, or someone who's been bereaved, or men, or there were just all these other occasions and reasons and recipients. So in those 6 years, we obviously added to it. We worked with Stand Up to Cancer for a package for them. Loads of different reasons, but basically the core idea has stayed the same, which is that whatever's in that box needs to offer someone a bit of TLC, encourage them to take a bit of time for themselves. And yeah, I think that's it.
Nice. No, it's beautifully articulated. I think the most interesting startups are when the founder creates the business from a very personal experience and sees something that needs to be better in the world. So it's lovely to hear that story.
Brilliant.
And what we always start by talking about what the guests would like to hit reset on? I mean, obviously you run the business, you don't just think about marketing brand, you think about everything within the business. But is there one thing that you think early stage businesses or marketing departments need to hit reset on?
I think it's probably having that clarity of what it is of your, it is of your position, your brand, but then how does that flow through the whole business? So for us, as a thoughtful gift company, for example, if a customer emails and they're saying, oh, my friend had a miscarriage and I want to send them something, we wouldn't respond with, well, this is what I'd send them. You would say, I'm really sorry for your friend. We'd be very human about it. And obviously that came naturally from the beginning because I was answering all the messages and it was very, very personal. But as we've grown and we've got services, she then, and whoever's, all the customer services people would then do that, inherit that same piece. So you everybody in the business has to kind of get what this is about. And it is about being thoughtful and caring. And, the biggest thing that probably goes wrong for us would be deliveries. Well, I don't run the courier service, so that isn't, it's not necessarily my responsibility, but I'm going to take it because those are still my customers. Yeah. So we will always, refund stuff, send something back out, add a little extra in there, whatever, to make sure that they still had the good experience, even though something that went wrong might not actually be our responsibility, if that makes sense. And I think just having that as well, I suppose empathy comes into it because most people who are buying a package from us are trying to convey empathy. And so if they then have a crap experience and a really cold customer services person, it just doesn't fit. So I feel like that's something that and it's harder as the business gets bigger, but we're working really hard at it. And I think there's loads of businesses that could do that better. Energy companies, for example, might want to be something really badly, but if when you ring the customer service department, you don't get the response, or if the bill's really high or whatever, you can't be a brand that people are going to care for. And I think so it's working out what I suppose putting the customer at the heart, which so many businesses say they do, but I think it's a big deal to actually do it.
No, I think it's a really good message. You're right. Internally, I think people will excuse that last mile or that last stage of the delivery or the call center, and they say, well, that's outsourced, that's not really our area. But the reality is it's what the customer interfaces with. So as you say, it's how they perceive your brand. They don't know how it's set up, and frankly they probably don't care. It's all about the experience that they get, isn't it? And big businesses have forgotten that a lot. I guess this has become even more pertinent during the last 9 months or 10 months or however long this pandemic's been going on for. How has COVID affected the way you think about running the business and I guess the demand for what you're providing?
Yeah, well, starting with demand, I mean, it went pretty much, it went nuts really from the minute that Boris announced, in the run up to Boris announcing the lockdown, because the lockdown was March 23rd and March 22nd is Mother's Day. Oh, God, and that for us is historically a huge time of the year for us. That is bigger than Christmas. That's like the one that's this massive, we see a massive growth, and then you obviously retain some of those customers. So it's a great point of the year. And in the week running up to Mother's Day, people were suddenly realizing that what had been a bit of a jokey, we'll touch elbows instead of shaking hands or hugging, or, all of that. It was like, oh shit, this is actually really serious. And so suddenly people realized they weren't going to be seeing their mums and their families that weekend. And then we were on Lorraine. And just so the traffic and the sales just went completely nuts. And you're balancing that with a team who are also hearing that news that, oh God, all my plans have changed, or my plans are cancelled. Should I be at work? This is a bit nerve-wracking. We've got to sort everyone out, like all of that happening. So that was mad. And I like that at that point, I think I just kept bursting into tears because I was like, this is such a big deal. And it's this huge opportunity, but it feels really weird to be having success after 6 years of, hard work, but at a time when lots of people are crashing, or they're going to, they have to close their businesses. So that was one part. And then I think the other part was just the team was so brilliant. Like, my brother is my head of ops, Two of my best friends are in the company on accounts and customer services.
Yeah.
Someone that I worked with before is our head of marketing. So I know the next, and I always knew that they were kind of going the extra mile, but this was beyond, they were in it. And it was quite overwhelming, to be honest, because it kind of took that for me to really realize how much everybody was in the business.
Yeah. And like, it sounds like the culture you've created is very interconnected with the brand, and whether it's the people that support you in growing the business internally or your customers, it feels like you achieve that holy grail of what people see from the outside or the inside being the same. I mean, how intentionally have you thought about that as a founder?
I think we're trying to. I think it is hard as it gets bigger, but I think it's in part it's kind of bringing in the right people, and we know you know pretty quickly who's in and who's willing, and also you can see that they're excited to be part of it, because it is. I mean, the ones who are with us, the team who were with us like a year ago, have seen change from where we were a year ago to now. Like this month just gone, at the moment we're up like 750%, but throughout most of last year it's been 300 to 400%, 100%. Like, it's huge growth, which operationally is massive to deal with. And they've been part of that, so they can see the opportunity. And I think maybe it's in part it's the people who we've got in the the management team and myself. We do want to help. We've got one of the team came in. She applied for a job for 6 hours a week packing boxes because she does photography and is very creative, and she was doing that, but obviously that's kind of freelance and wasn't very predictable. So she wanted something that was like a steady something a week. And then we kind of got her to look at some of our photography, and she's ended up being our marketing assistant, does all our photography. She made beautiful ads for us at Christmas and Mother's Day last year. And it's like, that feels amazing, that having that. And similarly, we had someone that started with us in March. She was a job stacking shelves because she just qualified to do, it was her own business to do with massage and physio. Couldn't do it, could see that this was, obviously that was going to work in COVID. And so she came again to pack boxes, and she was so efficient, brilliant. And she's ended up being a warehouse manager. And it's just really interesting that you kind of can advertise for a role and look at a CV and think that person is perfectly matched. And then you meet people, and people like, most people, not everyone, but most people do like added responsibility, to feel like they're being given, that you recognize something in them and you're giving them that, and then they give you so much more back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that for me, I mean, that has been a massive lesson. I've never run a business before, and all of this year, learning all those things has been really important. So when we're thinking, right, we need to change up the ops team, how do we, stretch to more orders, whatever it is, start by looking internally, obviously, who have we got that might have some skills that we're not using yet.
Yeah, no, I love that. I really love that. I think it sounds like you've created that physiological safety that people talk about, which once people feel like they're in a place and they can have some autonomy and they're trusted, then if they're much more connected into the business. And it feels to me, listening to you, Steph, that it's as meaningful for you to see someone go from the warehouse floor to a more senior role as it is to see a customer in distress being able to provide a gift to someone in their family.
Yeah, I think it's become so in the last year or so. I think I've clearer in my head. I think just before lockdown, I went to some talk and I was speaking with some really successful women, all of who run businesses where they'd taken massive investment and they had, sales figures, sales targets, exit strategies and all that stuff. And I really questioned myself on, oh God, am I doing this completely wrong? Because I don't have those things. I haven't taken investment. We've grown steadily since we started. It's been a really nice upward curve, and then obviously a sort of spike now. But I was questioning whether I'd been doing it all wrong and should I have these strategies. And actually the last year has shown me that that's not how you have to run a business. And I think my generation grew up with The Apprentice or and that kind of thing, where it's like that's how you run a business. Dragon's Den. Yeah, you've got to take a massive investment. and then you've got to smash it. And actually, I'm hopefully building a really solid business, but also that I feel good about, and that it does allow me to do the nice bits as well. It's not just tearing everyone down to get to the top. I think it's
No, and you're right. I think it's great for people to hear an alternative narrative about founding a business and growing it, rather than having to go and bring investors in, because pretty much everybody you talk to that has done that has some horror war stories to share about how those investors changed the business or requested growth that was a little bit unrealistic. So
I think it's really easy to lose track of what success looked like to you. Like when I started, in part, it was actually spending time with my family. It wasn't to never see them, and it wasn't to earn millions of pounds. I don't know, like there were things in there which part of success is, that I have to go back to every now and then and go, it wasn't just about building the biggest thing I could build, and it wasn't just about selling it quickly. Do you know? And I think it's really easy to get distracted once you're on that track, especially because you've got people around you going, oh, well, don't you want to do this? Would you not think about doing this? Oh, you should definitely take investment. Oh God, you've got to be really steady on what you think is your success.
Yeah, but I think I know you well enough to know that you've got a lot of ambition for the business. It's not like you want to get the right balance, but this is not a lifestyle business for you. This is you want to be meaningful and allow more people to be meaningful by providing thoughtful gifts to the ones they love. So how do you get that right balance of, in an early stage company, of the right culture and the right speed of growth with, I guess, the drive and the ambition to think bigger and do better?
Yeah, I think in a way we were very lucky over the first sort of 5.5 years, in that it has been this steady growth. So you'd add someone, you were adding one person at a time, or you were adding a new product at a time, or you were adding a new idea. So you could retain that, like we have handwritten tags that go out in every package, and they always get mentioned. We always have feedback about how lovely that is. And it's something that with scale, obviously that takes up quite a lot of time, but it's important. So it's like, right, well, that has to be built into our process. That has to be built into our costs and our timings and everything else. I think it's been really, really clear on the brand. Obviously, my background helps. But also I think everyone around me is really clear on what it is we're trying to do and what's important about the brand values. So you have to keep coming back to it. And then as we scale, I mean, we've had to turn down marketing because sales orders have been so high and demand has kept going up. And then you realise that we're not set up for that, or there's things we need to do just to make sure we're ready for it and we're not getting orders wrong. And that is, there's a bit of you that kind of goes, oh God, we could be kind of turning over even more money, but there's no point if we get it wrong. And our return rate at the moment is like 32%. And it has been that for a long time. And it hasn't changed despite this growth.
Yeah.
And that tells me that we're still getting it right. And I think that's a key thing for us to look at, because we might suddenly be selling more, but if that return rate goes down, then they haven't had the experience that we wanted them to have.
And I think, again, it's a useful insight for bigger businesses to think about, because the role of marketing and customer experience, and actually just putting your brand out there in different times, particularly during COVID. I mean, there's obviously been a lot of brands that maybe been critiqued for some of the messaging. Everyone rushed to do the same thing to get people on Zoom calls in their ads, and some people continued to spend, some didn't. And of course, I think sometimes brands forget that businesses interpret that and have a perception of that brand and how they will interact with that brand. You've obviously decided that in order to retain that repeat rate and continue to delight your customers, that you want to get other things right before you start bringing a whole bunch of new customers, because you may not delight the new customers, or in trying to delight the next 100,000 customers, you may piss off the previous customers by not being able to look at. So I admire that kind of balance. But I'm really intrigued as to how, given your background, how do you think about the role of marketing in growing the business?
I mean, it's critical, especially with, I suppose for us, a lot of it is the two sides. So obviously it's retention. And in this last year, we've gained so many new customers. So it's important that we have a really clear plan of how we're going to kind of recontact them and get them back in. But also finding new audiences. And that's a real mix of different platforms, I think, for us. PPC has been huge for this year. And I think going back to your point about not wanting to bombard people, I was really conscious. As a consumer, in that first few weeks, when you were watching ads for, like a sparkly dress or lipstick or something like that, and you're kind of going, really, I'm at home, I'm in my joggers, I've got 3 kids on me.
Yeah. You couldn't have got this more wrong.
You couldn't have got this more wrong. And it kind of just seemed a bit tone deaf, because normally you've kind of got to go, oh, well, who's my market? I'll just go after them. But you've got the whole country sitting at home in the same boat. So you could really relate to people if you just thought about it a bit. And so like we turned off all our ads because I was just really conscious of looking opportunistic and, bombarding people with, oh, if you've been having a terrible time, or you've, suffered bereavement, or someone here, like obviously everybody is. So it just felt not the right fit. But PPC, so that we were there when people were looking for us, was perfect, and it worked really well. And just is less invasive, I think. For marketing, for me, I think there's a real balance with, it's the same with kind of CRM and how much you buy a tent for one summer trip for something, and then for the next 10 years you get a weekly email about caravans and tents, and you're like, I'm not doing that again. No interest.
Terrific. I don't want to go there again.
No. So I think just having that mindfulness, and that's something, again, if we're a thoughtful gift company, if I was harassing everybody with emails every other day, it just doesn't work. And then I'm sure if you looked at the stats, they'd be going, oh, but the conversion rate would be this, and that would bring in more. But it's like, yeah, but then if you pissed off most of your customers in the meantime, because I know I get hundreds of emails. I don't know what, you don't unsubscribe necessarily just because you don't get round to it, but you just ignore them. It doesn't give you a warm connection with that brand.
No, absolutely. And I think it shows the importance of having that balance, the conscience and the analytics that point to the fact that maybe you could be doing more. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, and that probably as well, going back to people who've taken massive investment and you've got these deadlines by which you've got to meet certain targets, that is a very different pressure, which probably means you would send those emails, because you've got to hit those targets.
Yeah, you're forced into, you have to do certain things just to have a chance of having enough media out there and getting enough of a conversion rate so that the numbers come through. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So how do you, at what point in your head do you think about, well, one day maybe we need to do some bigger awareness and get more people aware of what we do? Does that ever kind of, do you ever think about that, or do you think that's too far away to worry about right now?
No, we do. I mean, the way we've done it with everything. So I brought in a head of marketing, it's coming up to 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
And so that was great, because it was another person who could, be looking at, because previous to that was all on me. And I think what we've looked at is testing. We've tried things. So we try it with a relatively small budget. We do it ourselves. So initially with PPC, we were doing all that ourselves before we brought in an agency and put more money behind it.
Yeah.
And for me, that's been the way to do it. So it's literally kind of one thing at a time, adding to the mix. And we're sponsoring a podcast, Elizabeth Day podcast, which has kind of 250,000 listeners in February. And again, it's like, well, let's try that. And before we go, right, I'm going to do 8 podcasts and commit to 3 weeks on each and all the rest of it.
Right.
Let's see. And that obviously that takes time, but it means hopefully we're learning all the time. But I think I've always said, and so this year has been really interesting from this point of view, I've always said that Don't Buy Her Flowers isn't a hard sell. There's people buying gifts all the time. There's people who are having a bit of a rubbish time, or who need a bit of TLC all the time, especially in the world we're in at the moment. And what we do it really well. So that's why, keeping that customer journey experience is so key. but it's always been the case of if we reach more people, we will have more customers because we're not selling something that's really, really niche. And generally, when people see it or hear about it, they go, "Oh yeah, of course. That's perfect. I can create a gift. I can hand pick items. There's a massive range. It's all done for me, but it still feels really personal." And so I think things like going on, being on Lorraine, or just having that exposure where suddenly you've got loads of people sharing us more because everyone's looking for gifts. It drives awareness, and so it's that balance between that and kind of acquisition, but it drives it to the point that that you're going to get some customers through, because there's always people looking for what we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does entirely. And I think it's listening to you. It's like thinking about where the business is at and how the ability, the capacity to be able to deal with a whole lot of new customers, but also just thinking about the places and the moments where you show up, rather than, let's build this multi-channel marketing strategy to be everywhere. Because the old way of building awareness would probably have been, well, if everybody needs this at some point, we need to be salient and we need to be everywhere. But of course, you don't want to spend that kind of money. But secondly, I guess you're thinking much more intentionally around, okay, we start with the people that have got intent and are in the market with search. And then we start to move a little bit above that. And what are the environments where people are in relevant contexts, or there's moments. And then I guess you just, as a lot of D2C brands do, you build it bottom up and layer on, test different audiences, as opposed to, we must have awareness before we can have consideration, before we can push people through. I think that's the big difference about kind of e-commerce direct to consumer brands and how they build their marketing. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's kind of, like the awareness piece, where we get some really lovely PR coverage, and that does really well for us, because there you have a chance to tell the story, and people are interested in that. And this idea of something that started on a bedroom floor, and that there's a story behind it. So that's always been in the mix, and that obviously has a really key role, alongside the kind of being in someone's face when they happen to be looking for what we do. So it's definitely kind of an integrated approach, but I think it isn't just going, when I worked in government and also in energy company, we'd have a massive, you'd split it up and go, right, that's PR, that's CRM, that's your ads, that's, and do it all at once. And I think, because
and then you don't know what works half the time.
yeah. Well, no, and you don't. And then each of the agencies would be telling you that their bit did the job. Right. So I think we're trying to do it very. I started it with, I obviously had a blog and social media, which I did all of it myself to start with. So I really learned what people were engaging with at the beginning. And I think quite often I get people saying, "Oh, do you have a marketing person?" I do now, but I didn't at the beginning.
Not at the beginning. Yeah.
When you're trying to learn about your audience and respond to them as well, you've got customers. The man package came about because a customer messaged directly to me to just say, my brother-in-law's in hospital and I'd love to send him a care package like yours, but for men. It was like, it had always been in the background. It's like, that's really simple for us to do. We probably should just do that, Same with the kids package. A lot of ideas come from conversations with customers, which if I wasn't involved in that, I wouldn't necessarily know.
No, and it speeds up that process of an insight being found somewhere in the business and maybe finding its way through to you, or maybe not. I remember a conversation with James, who's the founder of Tails.com, and he told me a very similar thing, that they've obviously scaled quite a lot in the last few years. Even now, he gets every single customer email come through to him in his separate inbox, and he looks at every review, and he spends half a day with a different customer service rep every week, because the value of having that direct customer insight is so powerful, and is what actually keeps a business like yours or his ahead, because big businesses just find it very difficult to do that.
And you can lose it really easily, I think, because you can get distracted by all the other stuff that's going on and the growth and the pressures of, keeping a team and knowing that you're responsible for paying them and all that stuff.
Right.
But like for us, the message tags are often they hit it home, because whatever the person's writing, and often they're quite emotional, or they're like, you've got this, you're going to be okay, or I'm sorry, to hear about your dad dying, or like all these moments that we could see. And quite often I'm not writing those tags anymore, so I wouldn't see them, but we regularly circulate them to the team. Someone go, oh, here's a good one, here's a beautiful one, here's a funny one, whatever, and it gets circulated to the team. And obviously we use them on social media as well, but those are a real leveler when you are getting lost in plans and all the other stuff and going, oh, hang on, what's it actually about is this message.
No, I think I love that, and I'm sure you'll try and retain that. So on that point, we haven't talked a lot about kind of technology. Often when you talk about startups or scale up business, you spend too much time talking about technology, and I love the fact that we haven't, but maybe just wanted to talk about personalization, because you've obviously talked about how there is still a handwritten note for every gift, which I think is remarkable. I heard Benedict Evans talk recently about there being two emerging types of e-commerce. There's logistics led, which is obviously Amazon, which is just incredibly fast at getting you what you need, but not with a lot of personality or experience. And then there's a growing space of experiential e-commerce that maybe some of the fashion brands like the Net-a-Porters and Farfetch have moved into. But it feels like you probably exist in that secondary space. How do you think about personalization and the role of technology in that as you're going to scale the business? I mean, it might be difficult at one day to have everything written hand, or you might find a technology solution.
I think the personalization, I think the phase of putting your name on everything and a logo on everything, and that kind of personalization, I think is that was just a real novelty for a while, I think. But this idea, I suppose, for us, the key bit is that, and what we've seen when we launched the Create a Gift package. So we used to have sort of set packages. We still have those, but where you could tinker with it. You could swap the chocolate, or you could choose a different magazine and that kind of thing. But ultimately, it was a set of kind of 5 products or whatever. Whereas now the Create a Gift package is a massive part of our sales, and that's it's completely down to the person who's choosing it. It's a category, you've got beauty, books, food and drink, lots of different categories, and the person can select from all of them. So you can end up with a lovely mix with your cashmere socks and a gin and tonic and a book and buttons, and so it's like this lovely combination, but it's completely personal to the person who it's for. And that, I think, is a massive part of our growth and our success, to be honest, because so making that easier, making it more attractive on a website and all that stuff, that's where technology can come in. But the key bit is around, the customer to do that, to build that makes it feel
them
like
the ability to do it, and then you've got the processes and the stock management behind it to be able to deliver on something that personal.
And it has complication, because from a logistics point of view, so you went from having a stock package, which I knew what box it fit in, and it was always really, to have, like, oh God, at Christmas, you have people sending like the most ridiculous volume where I think often men, I've got to say it, they just go down the list and chuck everything in. Like it's like last minute panic buying, chuck money at it. But you could end up with this huge stuff, and the ops team have then got to work out how to still present that beautifully. So that's a challenge that they don't thank me for, to be honest. But it leaves it with the customer to choose what they're putting together.
Yeah, no, I like it's kind of curation, isn't it? Of a to an extent, isn't it? You have perfected how to curate it so that it'll match, but then once you put that in the hands of the customer, of course they can choose it, but sometimes maybe it still needs your recommendations and suggestions on, you just chose this, we're not sure that maybe that's the next iteration of the tech.
Yeah, maybe, but I think, and sometimes people want to, most people don't, most people add 5 or 6 products. The basket spend would be around £50, and it's all, but it's just hilarious when you just, and like I say, generally men and groups as well. You get kind of groups of people buying. We've seen a lot of that this year, actually, because it's it's the hen do that never was, or the baby shower that couldn't happen, and those sort of things. So again, like, it all quite emotional. Everybody on the team at some point gets struck by the emotion of it. It'll be something in a message that just makes them go, oh God, this is so cruel. It's so unfair.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we could talk about this forever, but I'm conscious that we haven't got too much time left. So I wanted to ask you one final question, Steph. I often finish with, when I'm talking to a marketer, about how they're going to elevate marketing to the board table. But of course, you run the business and you have marketing in your DNA, so it's a bit different. What advice would you give to other founders or even e-commerce D2C businesses around how they think about their marketing strategy and growth?
Yeah, I think having that, just reflecting and putting the customer back at the center. And I think it's so easy to say, and I know it's marketing spiel, isn't it? It's, or business spiel, putting the customer at the heart.
Yeah.
But it's so key, and that would then direct everything, really. And I think just keep going back to that, keep consulting with your customers, keep really looking at what they're saying, what they're doing, the patterns they're buying, because it leads to a lot of decisions. And then I think for us, of what we could do better, I think it's more that the challenge this year will be what happens after COVID, and how do we retain that growth? How do we re-engage customers so they do come back and we become their go-to? And that is a marketing challenge, but we're working on it. But it does go back to continuing to make their experience, it all links obviously, so continuing to make the experience really good so that they do want to come back, and you're pushing against an open door effectively.
Great. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. I think that the resounding message that I've heard is you really have to listen to the customer and consult with the customer. Consulting with the customer is very different to having a few insights that get put into a board pack every so often. And I think business can probably learn a bit of that. I also love the message around the fact that grow the business at the right speed and the right pace, and you don't have to follow the same track that other founders may have done. And I also love the connectivity that you've created between the employer brand and the customer brand, and how it all feels like the same business. And I look forward to seeing how that develops.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Time for a Reset. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. We'll be back talking to a senior marketeer very soon. Make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes by subscribing on Apple, Spotify or SoundCloud, and leave us a review at timeforareset.co.uk.